Once there was a miller and his wife who had come upon hard times. Several years of bad harvests meant there was no grain to mill, and each year they became poorer and poorer. The miller feared losing everything. He didn't know what to do, so one night, in the pale light of the moon, he walked down to the millpond to think. As he stood by the water's edge, the flat reflection of the moon on the water rippled, and from it emerged a Nixie. Her skin was almost translucent, her hair cascading flutes of water. The miller was terrified. But the Nixie spoke to him with a voice as gentle and soothing as a stream. She asked him what was troubling him, and the miller told her. He was struggling to put bread on the table. The Nixie said, "I can make the harvests great and grain flow. I can make you have as much coins as grain in the mill. I can make it so you will not just have bread, but meats and cheeses and wines. I will make sure you have all of this, but you must promise me one thing." The miller fell to his knees, nodding. The Nixie said, "You must promise me what has just been born in your house." The miller agreed, and the Nixie slipped back beneath the surface with the faintest ripple. Then he heard a scream from the house. The miller rushed back, ran into the house to find his wife exhausted, cradling a baby. "We have a son," she said. The miller wept and explained the promise he had made to the Nixie. His wife said, "What good are all those things the Nixie promised if our son is lost to a drowned world?" They didn't take the boy to the millpond. But all the while it was just as the Nixie had promised. The harvests were bountiful and the water wheel was working day and night. Their coffers overflowed with gold, and they never went hungry. But the miller feared for his son, and the millpond was always nearby where the Nixie lurked like a dark thought. The boy forbid his son to go near the water. Boys do not stay boys forever, and they are not controlled by their parents forever. So before the boy became a man, the miller apprenticed him to a hunter far away. He would be safe from the Nixie in the millpond. The boy was taken to a village beneath a black mountain, and there he became a man and a masterful hunter. He was loved throughout the humble village that became his home. He became the hunter for the lord of the village, who loved him like a son. The lord had a daughter, who loved the hunter as he loved her. The lord saw this, and he was happy, but he challenged the hunter to prove his love. A white stag had been seen in the forest, and if he could hunt it, he could marry his daughter. The hunter agreed, and put on his best red cloak to honor the white stag. He was a masterful hunter, and it was not long before he came across the animal's trail. And then he saw it, a beautiful animal with huge white antlers. The stag saw him first and bounded away, and so the chase began. For 3 days and 3 nights the hunter followed the stag's trail by sun and moon, over mountains and through deep forest. The hunter was so focused on the hunt, he did not notice the path he took through the woods. Exhausted, the great stag came to a moonlit pool and jumped into the water to reach the other side. When the stag pulled itself onto the bank, the hunter stopped and aimed with his bow. He was so focused he didn't see the old mill or recognize the mill pond from his childhood. As he nestled his foot into the soft mud, the water lapped over his boot, and the Nixie pulled him in. At that moment the white stag wept and slowly transformed back into the lord's daughter. She paced up and down the bank looking for the hunter, but the water was still. Exhausted but not willing to leave her love, she fell asleep on the bank of the millpond. That night she had a dream. She saw the black mountain above the village, and on its summit was a beautiful meadow with a little hut where an old woman lived. When she awoke, the young woman decided to seek out the old woman on the mountain. She trekked up through dark woods and alpine meadows that gave way to black rock and ice. She waded into snow and thick cloud, climbing up and up until she emerged above everything. There above the clouds was a sunny meadow with a little hut and an old woman waiting for her. The old woman ushered her in and sat her by the fire, and the young woman told her about the hunter and the Nixie. The old woman said, "Take this golden comb, and at the next full moon go to the Millpond and comb your hair. Then leave the comb by the water and see what happens." The young woman descended the mountain. She waited for a full moon and returned to the Millpond. As the moon glowed in the still water, she combed her hair and then left the comb by the water. The still reflection of the moon broke into ripples, and a small wave of water enveloped the comb. As the wave receded, the head of the hunter was unveiled from the water. The young woman reached out to him, but he was suddenly pulled under, and the water stilled. The young woman wept as she told this to the old woman in her little hut on the mountain top. She soothed the young woman and said, "Take this golden flute. At the next full moon, go to the Millpond and play a beautiful tune. Then leave the flute by the water and see what happens." So the young woman descended and waited for the full moon to return. As the moon glowed in the Millpond, she played a tune so beautiful and melancholic, the whole forest wept for her lost love. She lay the flute at the water's edge and waited. It wasn't long before a wave bigger than the one before washed the flute under, and as the wave rushed back, the hunter appeared up to his waist. Again the young woman reached out, but he was pulled back under. So the young woman told this to the old woman in her little hut on the mountain top. The old woman said, "Take this golden spinning wheel. At the next full moon, go to the Millpond and spin until the spindle is full. Then leave the wheel by the water and see what happens." So as the full moon once more reflected in the water of the Millpond, the young woman spun flax until the spindle was full. She waited. Then a great surge of water came over the bank and enveloped the spinning wheel. As the wave rushed back, the hunter was completely unveiled by the water. The young woman pulled his hands as a pale hand clawed at his foot, but he was free of the water, and they ran. A terrible shriek burst from the Millpond, and a huge flood came gushing after them, moving much faster than they could. Before the water covered them, the young woman cried out for the old woman's help. As the water came over them, they were turned into frogs, and the flood washed them away. Crashing through the forest and into the rivers, they were separated, and each awoke alone in faraway lands. They eventually returned to human form, and neither knew where the other was. Each lived in sorrow and wandered the earth, longing for a love that had almost been washed away by time. It was not chance that set them both wandering toward the Black Mountain day by day, to become sheep herders on the mountainside. Their flocks would mingle in the meadows, and they were glad of each other's companies, but neither of them recognized the other. They stopped for the night by a lake where the full moon reflected on its still water. The hunter played a beautiful, melancholy tune, which made the young woman cry. "Why are you crying?" he asked. She said, "Once I played the same tune by a moonlit pool, and my love rose out from the water." Then a veil was lifted from their eyes, and each saw the other as their love. They embraced after years of searching, and the couple were finally married. They played the beautiful tune at their wedding, and everyone wept with happiness. Their happiness endured to the end of their days.